Have you ever walked into a place and felt it? That heavy, suffocating presence, like the air itself is alive? Some places don't just hold memories, they trap them. This is the story of Sunview Park, and the friends who dared to enter. It began as a joke, something to kill time on a quiet weekend. Ella, Max, Jordan, and Mia were restless, bored of their usual hangouts. Max, always the instigator, suggested something different, to spice up their night. "Let's check out Sunview Park," Max said with a grin. The others exchanged nervous glances. The abandoned amusement park, on the edge of town, wasn't just old, it was infamous. Everyone had heard the stories. "They say it's cursed," Ella muttered, hugging her knees, as they sat around the coffee table. "Yeah, and haunted," Mia added, her voice dropping. "People who go in, don't always come out. At least, not the same." "That's just small-town bullshit," Max said, brushing it off. "It's an amusement park, not some portal to hell." Jordan smirked. "So, why'd it close then?" "No one really knows." The room fell silent for a moment. The truth was, Sunview Park's history was as eerie as the stories. It shut down 20 years ago, suddenly and without warning. Rumors swirled, accidents, disappearances, even whispers of black magic. None were ever confirmed. "It's just an old, empty park," Max continued, leaning back confidently. "Come on, let's go." "What's the worst that could happen?" Mia frowned. Famous last words, Max. But despite her hesitation, curiosity gnawed at her. An hour later, they stood at the rusted gates of Sunview Park. The chain was thick with corrosion, its padlock almost fused shut. The moonlight bathed the park, in a pale, silvery glow, making the shadows stretch unnaturally long. Max pulled out bolt cutters, his grin wide. "Told you I'd come prepared." With a sharp crack, the chain snapped, and the gate creaked open, revealing the dark expanse inside. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Sunview Park," Max said, with mock grandeur. Ella shivered as they stepped through. The air was thick, damp, and oddly warm for an October night. The park's skeletal structures loomed ahead, rides, booths, and attractions, left to decay in silence. The group moved cautiously, their flashlights casting jittery beams across the wreckage. A broken carousel stood to their left, its painted horses frozen mid-leap. "Creepy as hell," Mia muttered, gripping her flashlight tightly. "Look at this place," Max said, his voice low. "It's like a time capsule." Jordan kicked a discarded popcorn bucket, sending it skittering. "Yeah, a creepy one," he replied. "Feels like everyone just vanished." As they ventured deeper, the silence grew oppressive. No crickets, no wind, just their footsteps, and the occasional crunch of debris. It was as if the park itself was holding its breath, waiting for something. Ella stopped suddenly, her flashlight frozen on a booth. The paint was faded, but the sign was still legible: "Win a prize. Everyone's a winner." A stuffed bear sat inside, its button eyes dull and torn. "That shouldn't still be here," she whispered. "Relax," Max said, but even he sounded uneasy. The bear was pristine compared to its surroundings. Its fur wasn't matted, its color still vivid. It felt out of place, like someone had put it there, deliberately. "I don't like this," Mia said, backing away. "It's just a toy," Max insisted, picking it up. But as he did, a faint sound broke the silence, a child's giggle, soft and fleeting. The group froze, their breaths catching. "Did you hear that?" Ella whispered, her voice shaking. "Probably just the wind," Max said, though he didn't meet her eyes. The giggle came again, clearer this time, and definitely not the wind. The sound seemed to come from the carousel ahead, though it remained still. Its mirrors, cracked and dirty, reflected their flashlight beams, in jagged patterns. "No way," Mia said. "I'm not going over there." But Max was already moving toward it, curiosity pulling him forward. "Wait," Ella called, but he ignored her. As he approached, the faint melody of the carousel's tune began to play, slow and distorted. The carousel began to creak, its platform shuddering, as if it might turn, but the machinery remained still. "That's impossible," Max muttered, his flashlight fixed on the cracked gears below. The others stood back, tense. "Let's go, Max," Ella shouted, her voice cracking. Max hesitated, then took a step back. As he did, the giggle sounded again, this time closer, followed by a faint whisper, "Play with us." It wasn't just one voice, it was several. The group huddled together, their flashlights darting wildly across the carousel and the surrounding shadows. "Who's there?" Max called, his bravado cracking. No answer, just the faint sound of rustling, like footsteps on leaves. Jordan turned toward the sound, his flashlight landing on a figure. "There!" he shouted. The beam revealed a small child, standing in the distance, their face obscured by the shadows, their head tilted unnaturally to the side. "What the?" Mia whispered, her voice barely audible. The child didn't move. "We need to leave," Ella said firmly, pulling on Max's sleeve. But Max was frozen, staring at the child. Then it began to move, jerky, unnatural steps toward them. "Run!" Jordan yelled, grabbing Mia's arm. The group bolted, their footsteps echoing through the empty park. The sound of the child's laughter followed them, growing louder, almost distorted, like it was coming from all around them. They didn't stop until they reached the funhouse. The towering structure loomed ahead, its entrance a gaping clown's mouth, chipped and weathered. "In here!" Max shouted, yanking open the door. It groaned on its hinges as they rushed inside. The funhouse was dark, the air stale and thick. Mirrors lined the walls, cracked and warped, reflecting the flashlight beams in chaotic patterns. "This was a mistake," Ella panted, leaning against the wall. "No kidding," Mia snapped, her eyes darting around. The sound of faint whispers began again, echoing through the funhouse. "Do you hear that?" Jordan asked, his voice low. It was hard to tell where the whispers were coming from, they seemed to be everywhere. As they moved deeper into the funhouse, the mirrors became stranger. One showed their reflections. But the faces were wrong. Smiles stretched too wide, eyes sunken and dark. "That's not us," Mia whispered, stepping back in horror. "Keep moving," Max urged, though his own voice wavered. They turned a corner, only to find a dead end, a room filled with mirrors on every side. "This isn't right," Ella said. "We didn't turn that many times. It's like the place is shifting." The whispers grew louder, forming words now. "Stay with us. Forever." A cold wind swept through the room, despite there being no windows. Mia screamed, as one of the mirrors cracked, a hand pressing against the glass, from the inside. They stumbled out of the funhouse, gasping for air. The park felt different now, darker, colder, and somehow larger. The rides seemed to tower higher, their shapes more menacing. "We need to find the exit," Ella said, her voice trembling. But no matter which direction they turned, the gate was nowhere in sight. Instead, they found themselves at the Ferris wheel. Its rusted cars swayed gently in the wind, though there was none. A single car sat at the bottom, its door wide open. "Don't even think about it," Mia said as Max approached. "We're not splitting up." But Max was drawn to the Ferris wheel, as if in a trance. "There's something up there," he said, his voice distant. "I can feel it." Against their better judgment, they all climbed into the car. The wheel began to move, on its own, creaking and groaning, as it carried them higher. The park stretched out below, a maze of shadows and decaying structures. From the top, they could see the carousel moving now, its horses bobbing, up and down, in eerie synchronicity. The laughter came again, louder this time, accompanied by faint figures, darting between the rides. "We're not alone," Jordan said. As the car descended, the air grew colder, frost forming on the windows. When they stepped out, the park was utterly silent. No laughter, no whispers, just an oppressive, suffocating quiet. "This place doesn't want us to leave," Ella said. Suddenly, the ground beneath them shifted, like the earth itself was alive. Cracks formed, glowing faintly, with an unnatural light. The group backed away, their flashlights flickering. "What's happening?" Mia screamed. The cracks in the ground grew larger, the glowing light intensifying. The whispers returned, louder now, overlapping in a cacophony of voices. The group clung to each other, their flashlights flickering wildly. "We're trapped," Ella whispered, her voice trembling. From the cracks, shadows began to rise, vague, shifting forms, that seemed neither solid, nor entirely ethereal. The figures moved with purpose, their eyeless faces turned toward the group. "Run!" Max shouted, breaking into a sprint. They fled, toward the old roller coaster, the shadows following. The air seemed to thicken, making every step harder. "It's like we're running in water," Jordan panted, his voice panicked. The shadows were closing in, their whispers deafening. The group scrambled onto the roller coaster platform, the massive wooden structure, creaking beneath their weight. "Up there," Max pointed, to the loading station. They climbed onto the track itself, the height giving them a better view of the park. From above, the cracks in the ground formed a pattern, like a giant sigil, etched into the earth. The glowing light pulsed in rhythm with the whispers, which had become a low, guttural chant. "This place isn't just haunted," Ella said. "It's alive." The shadows began to climb the roller coaster, their forms elongating unnaturally, to stretch toward the group. Mia screamed as a hand, cold as ice, grazed her ankle. "We can't stay here," she cried, kicking the shadow away. As the shadows swarmed, the sigil on the ground flared brightly, illuminating the park in an eerie, pulsating glow. The rides began to move on their own, Ferris wheels spinning, the carousel whirring, even the bumper cars, sparking to life. "Look!" Jordan shouted, pointing toward the funhouse. The glow seemed to originate from there, a beam of light, shooting into the sky. "That's the source," Max yelled. "If we can destroy it, maybe we can stop this." The group climbed down, from the roller coaster, and sprinted toward the funhouse. The shadows seemed to anticipate their move, converging on them, like a living tide. Max grabbed a loose piece of wood, swinging it at the shadows, to clear a path. They burst into the funhouse, the air inside, crackling with energy. The mirrors reflected the glowing sigil outside, creating a dizzying maze of light. At the center of the room, a large, cracked mirror pulsated with an unnatural energy. "That's it," Ella said, her voice steady, despite the fear in her eyes. "That's the heart of this place." The mirror's surface rippled like water, and a face began to form, a grotesque, contorted version of a clown, its grin impossibly wide. "You cannot leave," the clown face hissed, its voice a mixture of laughter and growls. "You belong to the park now." The group hesitated, their terror palpable, but Max stepped forward, gripping the wooden plank like a weapon. "Not today," Max growled, swinging the plank with all his strength. The mirror cracked, the clown's face shattering into fragments. A deafening scream erupted from the glass, the entire funhouse shaking violently. The mirrors around them began to explode, shards flying through the air as the ground beneath their feet trembled. "We need to get out of here," Mia shouted, pulling Max away from the collapsing mirror. They ran out of the funhouse, just as it began to crumble, the structure collapsing in on itself. The sigil outside dimmed, its glow fading, as the park fell silent. The shadows dissolved into the ground, leaving only the faint rustling of leaves. The group stumbled to the front gate, which now stood open, the rusted chains broken. They didn't look back as they fled, their footsteps pounding against the cracked pavement. The park seemed to watch them leave, its silence unnerving. Once they were outside, the oppressive weight lifted, the air feeling lighter and warmer. They stopped at the edge of the forest, panting and covered in dirt. Did we actually make it?" Mia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I think we did," Max said, his eyes scanning the dark trees behind them. But even as he spoke, the faint sound of laughter carried on the wind, sending a shiver down their spines. "Let's go," Ella said firmly, "before it changes its mind." As they walked back toward their car, the park loomed in the distance, its dark outline a permanent scar against the horizon. They didn't speak, each lost in their thoughts, haunted by what they had seen and survived. And as they drove away, the radio crackled to life, static filling the car, before a distorted voice whispered, "See you soon." The group froze, their hearts pounding, as they exchanged terrified glances. The nightmare wasn't over. Would you dare step into that park again? Let us know what you think. Like, share and subscribe for more stories like this. If you can handle it.